Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, the triple hanky book The Fault in Our Stars gets the full screen treatment. Tom Cruise goes Groundhog Day in Edge of Tomorrow. Jon Favreau brings the sizzle, literally, in Chef. And we take a look at another blockbuster book made into a movie with our home media moment. In our triple feature of older movies, we'll look at Prometheus, Joe's pick for old classic Unbreakable, and Oscar-winning Amadeus. And in honor of Unbreakable, our top 5 this week, our favorite Samuel L. Jackson performances. First, though, we've tried to shy away from too much casting news since the days of Ben Affleck playing Batman months ago, but this one has turned more heads than most others recently. Robert Pattinson of Twilight fame is gearing up to play Indiana Jones in a series reboot. What do you guys think of this, Joe?
Well, I think that the typical thought that people go to is this guy's associated with Twilight. There might be a lot of hate there. I know we talked about this briefly, but I think that's kind of unfair because in the little bit that I've seen outside of Twilight, I think there's potential for this guy to act. And even though I'm not entirely sure that he could really fill the shoes of Harrison Ford, I do feel that it's significantly better than the other casting possibility.
Well, yeah, I'm glad they didn't stick with Shia LaBeouf.
Because he was basically got to take the reins for the franchise, and a lot of people had very mixed feelings about that. And you know what? I'm willing to give him a chance.
Okay, Justin, what do you think?
I mean, we have to take into consideration here that they don't want to let Indiana Jones die. I mean, obviously, 4 was a misfire. Nobody was really happy with it. And I feel like giving him a shot at a reboot, hopefully not rehashing Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'm okay with it. My only real concern is, can Robert Pattinson step up his game? Honestly, out of the majority of the Twilight ensemble, next to maybe Anna Kendrick, who I only think half counts because she only has like a part in one movie, he's probably the most talented of the bunch. It certainly isn't Lautner because we both gave Abduction an F way back when.
Taylor Lautner's terrible in everything.
He's an abysmal actor.
Grown Ups 2, Abduction you mentioned, Valentine's Day. He hasn't done anything I've been impressed with.
But I mean, I know Remember Me was not very well received, but I did generally think he did an okay job in the movie. Water for Elephants, I thought he showed promise. I think he can pull it off, provided he steps up his game. And the way I kind of view it is, I look at it sort of in the same vein as Tom Hardy taking over for Mel Gibson as Mad Max next year. I mean, yes, it's not Mel Gibson, but he does look the part whenever I see a production still. So, I mean, it definitely falls into the wait-and-see variety category for me.
Tom Hardy's got a good pedigree, though. I mean, he's been in a lot of high-profile movies and roles. My problem with Robert Pattinson isn't specifically that he's not up for it, because I thought he was really good in Water for Elephants. I think he can do it. The question is, have they picked somebody that is going to anger fans of the series enough that their interest may not be piqued?
No. Trust me. Fans might be angry about it, but that'll make them even more likely for them to see it so that they can hate on it.
So they can rip on it. That's true.
Yep.
Sad yet unfortunately true.
But is that the way to start a franchise?
Well, bear in mind, you've already said the nastiest word in the fan base curriculum. Reboot.
Yep. I mean, if there's anything, look, a lot of people like the Star Trek reboots, but a lot of people had problems with them too.
That's true.
You know, so if you want to stir the pot, it's possible maybe Pattinson does have, the talent for this. Maybe they honestly do believe it's a good way to start the franchise, but it could just be, hey, maybe they think they can appeal to Twilight fans and get them into Indiana Jones. I mean, I don't know. It could be a completely strange angle.
It just seems to me like picking Zac Efron straight out of High School Musical to do something like this. Like now we see Zac Efron doing a lot of varied roles like Neighbors and Awkward Moment, but it took him a few movies to get to that point where we sort of forgot, okay, he was the kid in High School Musical. I just think it might be a little soon to be plucking people from Twilight for this kind of a high-profile role that's more masculine-oriented.
Maybe they're trying to be fair. Maybe they're trying not to take the whole Twilight franchise into consideration. Like I said, it's quite possible maybe they just thought that he was good for the part. I mean, I'm willing to give him the benefit of a doubt.
I mean, it's been 2 years. I mean, he's clearly trying to make some degree of an effort to shed his image, and he's openly admitted he was never a fan of the franchise. So,
Nope.
No, that's true, and hopefully maybe on the press tour for the Indiana Jones film, he'll be even more vocal about it. Look, Twilight sucked. I know it. You know it.
Let's move on.
Let's move on and come see the movie. I could see that. All right, first up, though, on the new release docket is The Fault in Our Stars. Big hit this weekend with a $48 million debut. Definitely a success. Two of the stars of one of this year's earlier young adult adaptations, Divergent, team up again here. Instead of playing siblings, however, this time Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort play romantic interests, Hazel Grace Lancaster and Augustus Waters, in The Fault in Our Stars, based on the bestseller of the same name by John Green. Hazel Grace is a 17-year-old cancer patient who meets Augustus at a cancer support group that he goes to as a favor to his friend Isaac, played by former Nickelodeon star Nat Wolff. Hazel Grace tries her hardest to put walls up around her so Augustus doesn't get hurt, but he eventually breaks them down and a romance blossoms. Some films are known as Oscar bait, seeming to be made just to earn Academy Awards. The Fault in Our Stars I see as sort of the MTV Movie Award equivalent. Beautiful young stars saying witty lines involved in a romance where someone is bound to get hurt. It definitely falls into the cheesy category with some of the dialogue, and though the two have great chemistry together, I'm not quite sure if Elgort is a good enough actor to pull off some of the more dramatic scenes. Woodley, however, gives another fantastic performance and propels the film. It definitely has some logic issues with the characters, but it never falls into making fun of cancer or its patients. For all of its problems, it did hit the emotional notes necessary. I, for one, cried throughout much of its final quarter, so for that, I will give The Fault in Our Stars a B. Joe?
The thing that surprises me the most about Fault in Our Stars is that even though it certainly is full of some cheesy and overly sentimental flair you'd expect from such a film, I actually felt that it did have significant dramatic weight. As you said, I felt the performances were mostly very good, and I thought the story did ring very true to, I think, a lot of people in the situation. Like, it didn't really stress away from, like, I think, how people go through when they feel like they have a relative that actually has cancer. Mm-hmm. It did seem like it had some realism there, which I did appreciate. My biggest problem, actually, that I had from the trailers about the tubes and the whole sexual intercourse thing, they actually kind of resolved it in a little way.
Yeah, they sort of did.
They actually did. So I was actually okay. It was a nitpick, but no, really, that was the biggest problem I had going.
I know.
And the scene was actually fine.
Yeah.
Which I liked.
And also, moving.
And very moving.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. I actually think it did hit a lot of the right emotional chords, which is why I give it some credit. Plus, it was good to see Laura Dern again.
Laura Dern is really good as Hazel's mother.
Possibly the best parent I've ever seen.
Yeah, she was good.
And also, hey, surprise, Willem Dafoe is possibly one of the worst people ever. Possibly like the one of the most.
I didn't even know that was him till the credits. They gave him some good facial hair. His face looked a little bit fatter than I remember it being.
I knew the voice.
Yeah, that's where I could tell it.
But you know what? Actually, I thought he did conceal it pretty well. He wasn't. He was being a little more restrained than usual. Mm-hmm. But no, I actually thought that it was surprisingly good. It was a lot better than I was expecting it to be, and I would actually award it a B as well.
Nice. Justin, what'd you think?
Movies dealing with death and dying are almost a Hollywood staple for tragic melodrama, but I have to give credit to The Fault in Our Stars for adding the convention of a love story with comedic aspects to it. Granted, it's guilty of about every indie cliche a person can think of, such as quirky, underdeveloped side characters, low-budget animations, and a ridiculous amount of indie pop rock that almost feels like the scenes cannot end until the song does. But the concept is different, and it's largely thanks to the two leads who really keep the film believable and engaging. There's no denying that Fault is a tearjerker, but the scenes meant to be an emotional punch to the gut often end up minimally so. Fault is a slightly above-average teen romance, something I never imagined myself saying, but its faults are rather noticeable, and I give it a B-.
Good pun.
That was good.
I really was impressed with the way that the emotional scenes were handled by both the stars and by the script, because it was in the more lighthearted moments that I thought the script faltered a bit with the cheesy lines and stuff. But in the emotional scenes, I thought it worked well.
I liked the dialogue a lot. I kind of liked the wittiness, actually. I thought it was kind of charming in a way.
I mean, some of it worked, some of it didn't. The scene where they egg the car, his line to the mom is quite possibly one of the best movie lines of 2014.
That was pretty awesome. not sure if it really was realistic, but
No.
That was one of the parts where where I said that some of the logic
was a
little off. But
I mean, I appreciated what they were doing in that scene, but I was like, "There's no way they get away with that." I think that I liked the way they eloquently spoke, as if they were kind of being a little snarky about the whole thing, like they were trying to be more sophisticated when they really were. But then again, these were two intelligent people, so I felt like sometimes it was appropriate, but there were other points where I'm like, can't you guys just talk like normal people for one scene?
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
That was kind of weird for me because, at the start of the movie, that was really, really what they were trying to go for. Like, Shailene Woodley was really snarky.
Mm-hmm. It seemed a little Juno-ish.
Exactly. A little too in your face.
Speaking of which, I don't mind some of the quirky indie stuff, but I felt that the whole texting with the little written word bubble things was really unnecessary.
You didn't like that?
It didn't need to be there. Like, they could have...
I guess not.
They could have done it, but I would have rather just had it look like it was like a text box, almost like nonstop or something, rather than, like it was actually being written, because you're texting, you're not writing,
It's true. I think that was more of a nod to the book, though, because that font, that style of writing is the way the book cover is. So I sort of gave it a little pass for that. Justin, I guess, didn't like it either, though he mentioned it.
It just falls in that category of, it's an indie cliche. I see why people like it. I just think it's kind of
hokey.
It's unnecessary
All
and
right.
kind of hokey. Yeah,
that's fair. I mean, I felt that way about a lot of the things in this movie. They didn't quite bother me as much as they might have in another story, just because I did think a lot of other things worked.
Don't get me wrong, I think that these characters were rolling with the punches and they were trying to kind of laugh at death a little bit so they could deal with it. But do you feel like at times they were a little too morbid in their humor? Like, hey, I planned your eulogy.
Honestly, no.
No, I thought that was tasteful.
Yeah, I thought that was actually okay, because I feel like
Sometimes,
how some people might deal with their grief.
I suppose. I just felt like at times it was a little much, maybe.
Okay.
I felt like it was pushing a line sometimes.
I mean, the one thing, and you mentioned, Joe, how intelligent the characters are.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to grow up at a very early age. She got her cancer at 13. I forget what age he got his at, but in that same range.
I suppose.
So I feel like, if it's been a part of your life for 4 or 5 years, I think death is probably on your mind a lot.
Yeah, I suppose.
So maybe joking about it, sort of breaks the tension in your own mind a little bit. I don't know. Well, I'm glad we all liked it. Justin, I was
surprised.
Well, I figured it was going to be more of a C range for Justin.
No, I mean, have issues with it, but definitely better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's definitely got issues, but it's worth watching.
I think it works where it matters.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And Justin, just to speak to the side character comment, apparently in the book, Isaac has a much bigger role.
I don't doubt it.
Which I think. I mean, he was to me like the comic relief. I didn't think the two leads were. I mean, they were cute together, but they weren't really that funny together. He was sort of the comic relief.
He did have some funny scenes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, up next we have Edge of Tomorrow. Slightly more disappointing take at the box office, but Joe's going to tell us how he liked it.
Edge of Tomorrow is a 2014 science fiction film based on the novel All You Need Is Kill. It stars Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, and directed by Doug Liman. The story takes place in the near future, where Earth has been invaded by aliens called mimics, which have swallowed most of Europe and are advancing. Cruise plays William Cage, an army major who isn't really interested in combat, but after getting on the nerves of his superior officer, he is forced to go to the front lines. There, he is attacked by a rare mimic which splatters some blood on him. He then dies, but then wakes up at the beginning of the same day of the invasion. This happens over and over before finding Rita Vertrasky, the best soldier in the Defense Force, who apparently has experienced the same thing at some point. With this newfound ability to relive the same day over and over again as long as he dies, Cage is trained by Rita to slowly become the ultimate soldier and defeat the alien menace. Though this film does have a concept which seems original, it has been done before. Still, the execution is what stands out here, with much of the film seeming to use the bizarre situation for an almost darkly comedic effect, while building some strong character growth for a character who is strangely likable, but becomes even more so by the end of the film. I do feel that the movie loses some momentum once it starts trying to be more serious, with the side characters being established as unlikable, and then being so underdeveloped that we can't really care about them. Still, the main characters are likable enough, and the effects are pretty awesome. The aliens are sadly just monsters here, and are left mostly unexplored, which I thought was kind of unfortunate. Still, this is an enjoyable ride, and one of Cruise's best performances in years. B+.
Nice. Justin, what do you think of Edge of Tomorrow?
There's a certain art to making a great summer blockbuster that offers up enough of an element of intelligence as well as keeping the audience entertained. It's a difficult balance, but just like X-Men Days of Future Past, this too manages to give people some great mainstream fun in 2014 that truly, desperately needs quality entertainment. The source material this is based on, All You Need Is Kill, as Joe mentioned, presents a potentially fun concept, but really needed fleshing out. And yet, director Doug Liman, who also directed Bourne Identity, manages to respect the material and yet make it his own. This largely comes from the great use of its leads, particularly from Cruise and Blunt, and even somewhat Bill Paxton as Cruise's ever-cliched interpretation of a tough-as-nails military official and his team of ragtags that might as well have been torn straight from the pages of Aliens, though that's not necessarily a bad thing. The result is a film that plays out like Source Code meets Starship Troopers, and keeps the movie action-packed and at times, as Joe also mentioned, a little darkly comedic. However, the problem, much like similar premise Source Code, comes from the ending that's not necessarily bad, but rather leaves several questions unanswered and undermines an otherwise epic conclusion. Edge of Tomorrow gets a B+.
I do agree the ending was not...
Yeah, I think you'll hear me echo that sentiment as well.
Let's put it this way. They played it a little safe.
Well, they played it safe, and also, like Justin mentioned, they didn't really flesh it out. So I was a little confused as to everything that even happened at the end.
There were some things that didn't make any sense.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
I have to admit, yeah, there was something that's like bordering on a plot hole there.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I got it once I thought about it a little bit, but...
It's not very well explained.
No, it's not explained well at all, and honestly, I feel like that entire, last 2-3 minutes, completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely would like to see it again to see if the ending makes a little more sense to me. But Tom Cruise has always been one of the kings of the summer blockbuster, with movies like War of the Worlds, Top Gun, and the Mission Impossible series, all huge summer hits. Obviously, his recent box office receipts might refute that a little bit. As good as Edge of Tomorrow is, though, you can kind of see how that title was once apt. It's a truly rare breed of summer movie, a standalone sci-fi action film that actually delivers. Obviously, we see it a lot with comic book movies, X-Men and the Avengers among them, but not so much with this kind of a movie. Cruise is in fine form here and gives a riveting performance, as does Blunt, who continues to surprise me with each new genre she tackles. Maybe surprise isn't the right word. She's good in literally everything, so...
Yeah, she's talented.
It shouldn't faze me, but Lyman's directing is great, and like Groundhog Day before it, Edge never seems repetitive, even though repetition is sort of the core of the entire movie. Mm-hmm. The story is very interesting, and even a couple of the plot holes are addressed by people in the film, specifically the man that Cruise and Blunt go seek out to give them some help. I had a great time in this movie. Though the 3D is utterly useless, visually otherwise, the film is great. My biggest problem with it, really one of my only issues, as we just sort of discussed, is the ending. So for that, I'll drop it down a little bit, but I give Edge of Tomorrow an A-.
Wow.
Really a good movie.
Oh, definitely.
It's been very well received, which is why I'm surprised it didn't do that well.
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised, because critically it's been doing very, very well.
Once again, didn't check anything beforehand, but I did check. I think last time it was like 91% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I think it's in the high 80s now.
That's pretty good.
And people, at least critically, seem to like it. I haven't heard much, fan feedback so far. But
I feel like nobody's seen it yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I saw it. Well, Joe and I both saw it on was that Friday or Saturday? Friday night show. Opening night.
It was like, what, half
It was
full?
Maybe 40 people in the whole theater.
Yeah, it wasn't really that big.
It wasn't. I mean, granted, we saw it in 3D, which typically doesn't do as well as the regular.
Still, for a Friday night, but, not a big crowd.
I mean, this is opening at number 3 for the weekend. Maleficent, in its second weekend out, beat it. Yeah. And I think that's got to be disappointing for the filmmakers, because here they've really put together a great movie.
Definitely a fun summer movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a good summer blockbuster, and the blockbuster part isn't really going to happen.
It's probably because it is an independent sci-fi action movie, which people might not be as willing to risk on.
That's very true. It's a tough nut to crack. I mean, you look at Pacific Rim last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Same sort of film. It's not part of a series. It's got sci-fi. It's got action. And not a lot of people came out to see it.
It's like people need that reassurance of a franchise these days.
Right. Which it sort of does beg the question, how much do reviews really... I think word of mouth is a much more driving force than reviews. I mean, the reviews for Maleficent were middling at best, but a lot of people that went to see it loved
talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, to me, what really made Frozen such a success. Because the first couple of weeks Frozen was out, there was not a whole lot of
it did
attendance.
okay, but you're right. It was that word of mouth that spread over the next 4 months.
And became one of the biggest hits of recent years.
Yeah.
So how much do people really trust critics?
You'll get these movies that are critic-proof, like obviously Transformers is probably going to get savaged critically, but it still will do very well next month.
Sadly.
Unfortunately.
I guess it does have something to do with being established and having kind of reputation. Be associated something.
That'll grant you, Joe.
Other than Tom Cruise.
And also remember, I think it was Oblivion last summer with Tom Cruise, I think didn't do too hot.
No, the last couple didn't do that great. Oblivion, and what was the one, Jack Reacher, right before that.
Well, once again, the biggest movies he's done recently, Mission Impossible one's established franchise.
Absolutely true.
So,
and War of the Worlds remake.
And of course based on a classic novel. It's like
plus Steven Spielberg,
there's a little more
plus it had Steven Spielberg behind it.
That combination of factors, you could see a little more backup there. Like, okay, classic novel, Spielberg, all right, let's go take a risk there. I'll be honest, I could see some people kind of associating like, oh, Tom Cruise is doing another thing that looks to the average person like War of the Worlds or Oblivion. Because I'll admit, from the few trailers, I could see people with that general conception.
Well, and that's what keeps Will Smith a little bit more fresh with the summer blockbuster status, because he does kind of change it up. And Tom Cruise has sort of been in this action-only role for the last few years. And you're right, Oblivion doesn't look that different on the surface from Edge of Tomorrow.
Even though it's a very different movie.
Very different, and this was much better. I think we can all agree there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I liked Oblivion more than anybody here, but this was way better than Oblivion.
Definitely a superior film.
Yeah.
One thing I think that was really well done in this movie that impressed me was, in terms of his character, like, his development is excellent.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Like, with each new moment, you see him how he, like, starts off trying to help people, and every little moment he tries to get better and better, but we don't know how many times he's done this. It could be thousands and thousands.
Right.
He gets so jaded, and then eventually he just becomes driven, like, this is the thing I have to do, this is the most important thing.
Right.
That's it. And, like, I just like that, because he starts off being not a bad guy, but very different.
Just doesn't want to fight in the war.
He doesn't want to fight, and it's understandable. We see where he's coming from, and he is kind of thrust into this unfair situation, but he does rise above it, and realistically, by the context, it takes him a long time to get there.
Right. Yeah. I will give you that the side characters aren't as developed, or are maybe a little bit, as flip-floppy. It would be... I think it would take up too much time to sort of explain that.
Yeah. That's not the thing, though. I'm not talking about Bill Paxton or...
No, the cadets. The other cadets. I know.
J Squad.
Yeah.
They're not likable in the first place. I'm sorry. They treat them like garbage. They're not likable characters. And it just seems like I thought they were throwaways. The only person that really was worth anything was the one guy on the black gentleman on the plane. And he was shown as being kind of a terrible person anyway. So... I don't know. It was
I didn't really...
I thought they were throwaways.
Yeah, I wasn't really, too bummed out, when stuff happened, but...
Yeah. Even with Emily Blunt and the romance, to some extent, is kind of glossed over.
Yeah.
Which I felt like we could have benefited a little bit from it. Just a little bit.
I was actually okay with the romance only being, a little smidge of the movie, because I thought the romance story didn't need to even exist.
No. I was going to say, in the novel, it was incredibly platonic.
That's fine. I'm just saying that if they wanted to go there, we could have used a little more.
Okay.
I'm saying if they're going to do it at all, do it right.
Right.
I hate forced romances anyway.
That is
I didn't think it was that forced, to be honest with you. I thought it was...
Yeah, I thought it was pretty...
I thought in contrast to so many action movies where they literally are shoving them onto each other.
Well, that's true, but his admiration for her is kind of a main focus for him doing what he does towards the end. So I'm saying a little tension wouldn't have necessarily been bad.
No, not necessarily.
All right, well, moving on next, we have Chef, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Chef Carl Casper, played by Jon Favreau, was once an admired and talented cooking prodigy, now working at a restaurant where all he can do is make the things the owner, played by Dustin Hoffman, demands from him. However, after a heated rant in regards to revered critic Ramsey Michel, played by Oliver Platt, goes viral, costing Casper his job, he decides to invest in a food truck where he can give customers great food that he wants to make with the help of his line cook Martin, played by John Leguizamo, and his son Percy, played by MJ Anthony. I try to alert listeners and my colleagues when I feel like my own personal bias has impacted the grade of a film, and Chef is another one of those instances. My father was a chef growing up, and I really did feel for the father-son dynamic when they're cooking together. Chef is really all about the passion of cooking, and really a love letter to food as a whole. Favreau clearly has a passion for cooking, and he's passionate about having fun with it, and clearly he wanted to share these elements with actors that he's worked on in the past, such as Iron Man, the Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson, and so on.
Exactly.
Add in some strong, believable writing, and the film truly, as Dan brilliantly put it, sizzles. Granted, the best bits in the overall film are those that take place in either the restaurant or the food truck. The stuff that happens in between doesn't quite have the same draw, but altogether those scenes account to maybe 10 minutes of an almost 2-hour film, and they move very quickly. Overall, Chef is a hilarious, heartfelt comedy that was an absolute pleasure to watch, and I happily give it my 4th A of 2014.
Well, Justin, I don't think your personal bias, really has come through here, because I don't know much from cooking. I like watching people cook. But listen, I almost can't even describe how much I loved this movie. Favreau wrote such a fantastic script, wasn't afraid to write himself as a largely unlikable character for about half the film, especially in regards to being a father. All the characters are well defined. The cast is any indie film's dream. You mentioned a couple of them: Scarlett Johansson, Robert Downey Jr., Dustin Hoffman, Oliver Platt, all in supporting roles. They all work so well with Favreau, and especially John Leguizamo, my absolute favorite character in the film. Here's another film, we just talked about Moonrise Kingdom last week, that just plucked a complete newcomer child actor from nowhere, in this case MJ Anthony, like you said, as Carl's son Percy. He's so great and has great father-son chemistry with Favreau. The soundtrack is without question the best of the year, combining great Latin rhythms with reggae and instrumental versions of hip-hop songs. It complements the film as well as any of the food combos Carl is making. Chef is an outstanding achievement for Favreau, the director, the writer, and the actor, and it is my first A+ of 2014.
Yeah, hey.
Loved it. Joe, what do you think?
Oh, I liked it quite a bit, actually. I had no idea what to expect when I walked into the theater and sat down. All I knew about Chef was that it was about a comedy of some sort with Jon Favreau, and it was doing very well for an independent film. The movie is a story of inspiration and hope, following a very relatable character in a surprisingly real situation. The crux of the story is of a man struggling to retain his dream while dealing with a quickly changing world. It really captures the strange sensation of social networking and the huge impact that it can have for good or ill in our daily lives. What holds it all together, though, is the poignant comedy with great timing from a very charismatic cast made up with a lot of people such as Dustin Hoffman, Oliver Platt. I loved everybody. Everybody was utilized pretty well. The characters are all likable, particularly the son and Favreau's partner, as they set out on their journey to setting up a road restaurant, essentially. There is some serious weight to the events, but enough laughs to keep the whole journey running smoothly. It's a journey that doesn't get boring as you join these people on their escapades. Plus, it helps that the cast is littered with so many great actors. With the exception of some minor pacing issues towards the end and a semi-abrupt ending, Chef is an excellent comedy which could easily get a sequel. It is one of the best of the year by far, and I give it an A.
And none of us mentioned this with all the other great casts here, but Sofia Vergara is also very good as the mother.
Better utilized than some other ones.
Much better utilized. This is one of her, outside of Modern Family, I think it's probably the best performance I've seen her give.
I liked her. Yeah.
She had a really good dynamic both with the son and with Carl. The only concern, I guess, I sort of have with the movie is, Joe mentioned the whole social networking aspect of it. I do wonder how dated it may become in, say, 10 years. Will him not understanding Twitter
seem that hip.
Be as commonplace, now as watching a movie where you don't understand how a cell phone works or something,
It's true.
That's the one thing I sort of thought, well, that might be...
I feel like, yes, that might become a dated thing. Even if the Twitter bit does become stale. Social networking is always going to be out there now.
Yeah.
It's always moving rapidly. There's always new technology. Are Facebook and Twitter going to stand the test of time? I don't know. But I feel like there will always be the next best thing, and somebody's always going to be somewhat tech inept.
I agree, but they're talking about a lot of specific things in this movie. Twitter, Vine, the 1 second montage thing.
That did seem very trendy.
And it's very in the now, and it works great for 2014. I'm just saying, if somebody was to watch this movie for the first time 10 years from now, I don't know if it will seem... Yeah, like, obviously the dialogue will hold up, the characters will hold up, but will these things kind of seem like, oh, okay, I can't quite relate to this as much? I don't know.
Like,
just a thought.
It's like, what's Twitter?
Right.
Yeah,
it's either what's Twitter or Twitter's so omnipresent in 10 years.
It's like, why is this a big deal?
How does this guy not know Twitter,
Yeah.
It'd be like them using MySpace.
I'll be honest.
Yeah, honestly, think about it. Any movie that talks about MySpace, instantly I'm like, oh, wow, this came out a while ago.
Wasn't that in the first Iron Man? They mentioned it once?
They mentioned MySpace in the first Iron Man. He's just not that into you.
I remember that. That was a big deal.
Well, that was a big deal because it took 2 years to develop the film, and by the time it came out, MySpace was already outdated.
That's what I felt about Iron Man when they had the scene about like investing in it. It was like, people don't use MySpace that much anymore by 2008, so now it would be like, some people might not even know what it is.
Yeah, so obviously it didn't affect my grade of the film at all, but it is something that I sort of thought, like...
Might affect other people.
Might affect, in time, the aging of the film. But just a fantastic movie. I'm glad we all got to see it. This is sort of that time that I love in summer. This is when Mud came out last year, which ended up being my #1 movie of the year. Justin's #1 last year, too, Before Midnight. It's like the perfect time to release these sort of understated indie films that sort of fly a little bit under the radar but get a lot of buzz on them, and hopefully enough people get to see it. Fruitvale Station's another one. That was like
true.
That came out in the dead of summer last year amidst all these big blockbusters. So I'm glad we get movies like this alongside the big action movies.
Oh, yeah.
All right, moving on next is Cold in July. And in this film, Richard Dane, played by Michael C. Hall, TV's Dexter, accidentally kills an intruder in his living room in the middle of the night. The guy's father, Ben, played by Sam Shepard, starts stalking Richard's family, specifically targeting their elementary school-aged child. Turning to the police, Richard learns that everything he knows about Ben and the police themselves may be more than meets the eye. It's hard to talk about much more of the plot of this movie without giving spoilers, because the twists start coming within the first half hour and rarely stop. It's certainly one of the strong points of Cold in July, as is a great performance by Shepard. There's also a fun performance from Don Johnson, whose character I won't reveal other than to say he's a private detective. The downfall of the movie is, amidst these great twists and turns, the tone of the movie also twists and turns in some odd ways, and goes from this tense thriller to, at some points, almost goofy in its nature. Some of it works all right, specifically with Johnson's character, but much of it comes off as jarring and like you're watching a spoof of a thriller rather than the thriller itself. But other than that, everything else pretty much works, and it is a truly great story. So I will give Cold in July a B+. Justin?
In cinema, films that often start off as one thing and end up as another fall into the category of it works or it doesn't. Cold in July works, somewhat, but it feels like 2 conceptual short films crammed into one movie. It's not bad, actually quite the opposite, but it does make one wish that they had picked one or the other. First feels like a suspense thriller of the Cape Fear variety, involving whether or not Shepard is actually stalking Hall, and the second being about 3 different people from very different walks of life joining forces to uncover a disturbing mystery. It takes a bit to adjust to the slight tonal change, but fortunately, thanks to the 3 leads, the film never stops moving, and always makes one curious to see how the story will unfold. The other major issue, unfortunately, comes from director Jim Mickle's decision to make it painfully obvious that the film is set in the 80s. It's a fine backdrop, but when the film attempts to implement a tacky 80s electronics score when anything remotely suspenseful happens, it starts to get tedious. That said, Cold in July is a well-acted mystery thriller, well worth a look, and I give it a B.
Why was this movie so at odds with itself? It really, if they had stuck with one or the other, I think it might have gotten in the A range, because the story's great.
I was gonna say I was compelled throughout the entire movie.
Didn't you think, though, when they started doing like comedy pieces, that it was like it just was from completely out of left field?
They're obviously contrasting ways of life, so I mean, the fact that like some of it comes off as a little quirky is kind of understandable.
Well, I didn't mind that Johnson's character was quirky. I thought he had a good character. He was funny, but they would even do like shots that didn't make any sense. Like the one scene Don Johnson's making bacon in the morning. He's got like some pigs because he's a farmer kind of, and at the one point he's putting bacon on the frying pan, and then Mickles directing goes to like a pig with a surprised look on its face, and it was just like, what movie am I watching? It was just completely bizarre. That was the first example of it, and then there were a couple others sprinkled throughout, but I didn't mind the 80s feel to it. I mean, they were watching videotapes, for certain evidence, and
No, I mean like the backdrop itself is okay. The fact that they kept trying to make it feel like an 80s movie was
like it was made in the 80s.
Like it was made in the 80s.
Yeah.
With weird score, with all this other stuff. It's like, why?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to feel like a retro movie.
I guess I sort of fall in line with that, where you fall in line with the humor. Like, yeah, it is what it is, but it didn't bother me quite as much as it bothered you. Unfortunately, this was a one-week wonder at theaters, and Joe missed it. But definitely watch it when it comes to DVD, Joe, because I think you'll really enjoy it.
Oh, even though it's at odds with itself?
I think so. I mean, it's not like that jarring. Again, I gave it a B+. It just a few times it sort of just kind of took me out of it. It was like, I thought I was watching a thriller, not, National Lampoon Presents Cold in July. But...
Interesting. No, I mean, I'm curious about it. It does sound like a plot I would find compelling.
Mm-hmm. Don Johnson has found himself these real meaty supporting roles lately. I don't know how familiar you guys are with him.
Not really.
Because his heyday was really in the 80s with Miami Vice.
Which is probably what they're going for.
Which I think is what they were going for, certainly with the soundtrack.
Probably, yeah.
But he was a slave owner in Django Unchained.
Which slave owner?
He owned the huge plantation.
He was
I
forget the name of the character, but Big Daddy maybe, right? Or something?
Boss something Daddy or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
The guy before DiCaprio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
but that was a great role too.
Okay. Yeah, I liked him in that.
But anyway, he had a lot of drug and alcohol problems, Robert Downey Jr.-esque in the late 80s and 90s. So it's nice that in his elder age, kind of, finding some of these really cool
he's getting
supporting
kind of
roles.
Comeback, so to speak.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
All right, well, our final movie in the new release slate is the home media moment Flowers in the Attic. And when we originally had discussed doing this, there was a little bit of discussion about it because it is a made-for-television movie. It's made for the Lifetime network, which typically has sort of a reputation that goes with it, let's say, as compared to maybe an HBO or a Showtime movie. But this was a very successful television movie and based on a hugely popular book starring some Hollywood people. So I thought, why not talk about it here for the show? And Joe's going to tell us about Flowers in the Attic.
Flowers in the Attic is a 2014 Lifetime movie based on
this is there.
Well, because I went onto Wikipedia and I was like curious what the genre would be. It said Lifetime, so I'm using it. It's a Lifetime.
Lifetime Movie Network is a thing. I mean, it has its own network for nothing but Lifetime movie.
That's a genre. It's like
right.
How do you describe? Is it drama? Is it romance? It's a Lifetime movie, man.
Well, and Justin and I have used that in our reviews before.
It's just like
when certain movies tend to go a little cheesy.
That already
right?
that screams disaster immediately.
So.
Anyway, it's a 2014 Lifetime movie based on the 1979 novel and starring Heather Graham and Ellen Burstyn. The film follows the Dollinger family after their father dies. Corinne, played by Heather Graham, decides to move her family to her mother's house. Turns out there have been some issues in the past as Corinne's father had disapproved of the union and he had written her out of his will completely. This is emphasized by Olivia, played by Burstyn, Corinne's mother, who has a controlling and rather abusive mentality. She enforces strict rules on the children to prevent their grandfather from finding them. Sadly, the abusive nature of the household seems to be affecting Corinne as well. This docket for this week would have been an all-positive one, if not for this one. I do want to say that though I thought the music was excellent, and it helped to emphasize the true terror that was the character of Olivia Foxworth, who's possibly the evilest grandmother in fiction, I mean, Burstyn does an amazing job portraying her as this old-fashioned woman who is a real terror, but perhaps not entirely evil. Other than that, though, the dialogue is terrible, and most of the other performances are a tad above mediocre or just over the top. The film seems to be trying too hard to be edgy, and what's worse, it just feels like nothing really happens throughout most of it. Just lots of waiting as the kids wait around to find out what's going on, till finding out if they can discover the mystery. It's not all bad, but I assure you that most of the flowers in the attic aren't fake, they're just wilted, and I give it a D+.
That was a great one.
I'm sorry.
I enjoyed that a lot.
That movie was rough, and I was really trying.
Yeah, I told you it didn't.
I'm glad you tried.
I told you it doesn't get much better after the first 3 minutes.
No, I was like, it's funny, before I went to see Chef, I actually watched the intro, and I thought the intro, like where they kind of have the slow camera motion through the house, and like this really creepy, ominous music,
intriguing.
with some dialogue in the background. I was like, oh, this might be interesting. And Justin was like, well, I'm not sure if it gets much better than that. And that was probably the high point, so...
On that note, Justin, let's hear from you. Flowers in the Attic.
Television films are often split between the two extremes of either being very good, such as Helter Skelter and Behind the Candelabra.
And Merlin.
Lest you forget. Or just downright awful, such as almost every TV movie run on Lifetime. In the case of Flowers in the Attic, it's pretty bad, but it could have been a whole lot worse by Lifetime standards.
Yeah.
The additions of actress Burstyn continues to show off her talent, even with the weakest material, which is by far the worst aspect of the film. Although the story is supposed to be dark in nature, Flowers has moments where the story just takes random and often strange turns that don't make much sense, and have little to no explanation. Such as why Corinne is incredibly devoted to these children at the start, and yet completely changes her mindset midway into the movie for basically no reason.
As I said, that's kind of due to her own mother's influence, I think. It's not done very well.
Sort of.
But that's kind of what they're going for.
Yeah, I think it makes sense in the context.
But it wasn't transitional. It's like she comes with things like, I'm going to beat you.
Okay. Hence the have little to no explanation.
Exactly. Very little.
But that said, the film never really drags, and how the children come to deal with their atrocious situation always remains somewhat interesting, if not slightly disturbing later, but I digress. Overall, Flowers in the Attic thrives on its talent, but not much else, and I as well give it a D+.
All right. This is actually the second film adaptation of the book.
That's true.
And this one sticks closer to the source material and even adds in some things that the book didn't address that make it a better tale, if you can believe that. The decisions of the children make a little bit more sense in the movie, for one thing, but the best part about this film, which should surprise no one, as we just mentioned, is the performance of Oscar winner Ellen Burstyn, which we reviewed recently in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, her Oscar-winning performance. She attacks the role with such vigor that it elevates the film slightly higher than your typical made-for-TV fare. Make no mistake that the budget and some of the supporting actors do give us the sense that this film could have only aired on Lifetime. But it's directed fairly well, and the uses of shadows and light, especially in the attic scenes, work. It's a very faithful version, actually, of a book that just about everybody my age read between 7th and 10th grade, so I will give it a C+. You do have to figure, if this were a full-fledged feature, that it would have a higher budget and look much better, so it's probably a higher grade than I would give it if it were released theatrically, but for what it is, I think C+ is all right. Heather Graham is not one of my favorites, by the way.
She does okay in the movie.
I go back and forth with her. When she first started, I really didn't like her. And then, believe it or not, a stint on Scrubs for like 3 or 4 episodes. I was like, okay, she's actually pretty funny in this. And then she did a couple things I liked. And then, yeah, like, she was all right in this. But I think...
She was okay.
I thought she did an okay job. I mean, yes, the writing for her character is abysmal, but...
Yeah.
I mean, I don't hold her responsible for that.
I think they could have gotten a more...
Seasoned,
thank you, actress. Yeah. I mean, obviously they're not getting Julia Roberts in this movie, But you could get a B or C lister that I think
probably do better.
Could probably do better. Yeah,
It was all right.
but I don't know. I mean, I know you guys aren't real familiar with the book.
No,
not particularly.
It was really. I mean, it came out like you said, Joe, in the late '70s. By the late '80s, early '90s, when I was in middle school, high school, it was like, especially girls, everybody was reading this book. It was quite the hit.
I mean, I did a little
back
research.
In the day.
I did a little research after I watched it, so I knew it was a hit, and it was a pretty massive series. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know it was like this big. High school, would you say?
Late middle. I mean, kind of like the Hunger Games is, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th kind of thing.
Okay, so like middle to high school, yeah.
Yeah, definitely young adult. But the book is even more like intense. Lifetime shied away from the raping and a couple other things that take place.
I had a feeling there was a lot more going on there, for sure.
Yeah. I never saw the original movie they made out of it, but the original movie was like really not Disney-fied, but like it really shied away from like anything taboo.
Extremely watered down.
Extremely watered down.
I see.
So this at least has some more
faithful themes.
Yeah, some more faithful themes. Goes for some of the gusto. Burstyn, fantastic as always.
The dialogue was pretty bad.
The dialogue was the worst part of the film. That is an accurate statement.
And that's in the whole movie.
All right, well, next week maybe we'll have a better home media moment for everyone.
And we've had worse.
We've definitely had worse. I would counter Twice Born is worse than this. All right, well, up next, in honor of Joe's old classic that we'll be talking about soon, Unbreakable.
Damn right, son.
We are doing our top 5 Sam Jackson performances. Quite the list to peruse. Over 100 movies this guy's been in. Over the last at least 5 or 10 years, it seems like he's in every month a new movie comes out.
Well, as I was
at least a supporting role from him.
As I was telling Justin the other night, Samuel L. Jackson loves movies, and he likes to try and be in as many as possible.
That is absolutely true. And just as an aside, before we get in the list, I had no idea how old he was.
He's in his 50s.
He looks fantastic. No, he's older than that. He's in his 60s.
60s now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he looks great. He looks the same as he did pretty much 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the bald works for him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Joe, since this was your old classic that inspired us, why don't we go to you first for 5 through 2 on Sam Jackson's performances?
Well, I'll start off with an honorable mention. One of the earlier performances of his that surprised me, which is a great contrast to a lot of his typical work, is actually Mace Windu from the Star Wars prequels. I actually thought it was kind of cool to see him play a more stoic, reserved individual, and I thought he did a pretty good job playing that character. So that's my honorable mention for him there. My number 5 is actually Carly Ailey from Time to Kill. Jackson gives a very powerful performance here, and it's still a movie you need to see, Dan.
That's the one with McConaughey, right?
That's right.
Yep. I do need to see that. You're right.
It's like I think it's just a really, really powerful performance from him. You really believe what he's going through. It just seems like very honest, and it's intense. Like, it really fits well with the intensity of the movie and the situation. Definitely not something you should shy away from. It's definitely one of his best. My number 4 is Lazarus Woods from Black Lake Moan. I think this movie also has a lot of intensity, but it's a little bit different than his typical fare. It's not so much played for laughs. It's actually kind of serious, and you see it as being this over-the-top individual, but like an individual in real life could be from this time area, this type of mentality, and actually seeing this character being able to help someone else in the way he does, you'd think it would be ridiculous, but actually watching the movie and seeing his performance made it seem a lot more believable than I thought it was going to be. So that was actually a really big surprise for me there from him. My number 3 is Ordell Robbie from Jackie Brown. Quite possibly one of the best Tarantino villains with some of the best lines. I mean, AK-47, it's probably one of the most quoted
really
lines.
Got to see that.
From Jackie Brown. I'll have to run it sometime.
It's literally the only Tarantino movie I haven't seen.
It's actually my favorite. So,
nice.
It's an understated movie, but his role in this is like, I think it's one of the movies where he is the most intimidating because he's the primary force in the movie, but he just sells this guy as being the utmost scum, but a legitimate threat for everybody to contend with. And my number 2 is Elijah Price from Unbreakable. I think this is very different from his typical roles, but it's very powerful. It's also a little understated, but his dynamic with Bruce Willis is great. He's quite possibly the best thing about the movie. And that's where I'll leave it there because we're going to be talking more about that later.
Great list so far.
Yeah.
Well, my number 5 starts out with a different Tarantino performance. He's done quite a few, and that is Steven from Django Unchained, the butler.
That's right.
I mean, he doesn't show up until it's a long movie,
Half
but
an hour,
probably
half the movie.
Yeah, maybe an hour left to go in the movie.
Third act. Almost.
Definitely 2/3 is over before we see him. But a really good performance. He's such a terrible, terrible character, you know, but so well written, as are pretty much all the villains in Tarantino movies. Number 4 is Lucius, otherwise known as Frozone from The Incredibles. This was such a cutesy kind of performance for him. It's still Samuel L. Jackson sort of doing a kiddie kind of role and just having a lot of fun with it. He's not in the movie that much. Hopefully he'll be more prominent in The Incredibles 2, which was announced. My number 3 is Elijah Price from Unbreakable. As Joe said, just great chemistry with him and Bruce Willis, and what a fantastically written character. We're going to talk more about that coming up in the show. And number 2 is Nick Fury. From which film? I chose Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Just because he is, other than the Avengers, it's the one where he's the most prominent. He's got the most to do. I mean, Avengers is a slightly better film, I think, but his performance in Winter Soldier really is sort of the crux of the entire movie. Without Nick Fury in that film, you have no movie.
You could say that it's more his story than that of the Winter Soldier.
It's not far from the truth.
You could say that, and
Not
you
to,
do say that. And
focus on a point. Tim!
beat that point into the ground. But no, I agree. He definitely gets more screen time than the Winter Soldier. I would say that. But no, it's definitely my favorite of the Nick Fury performances. So that's my number 2.
Good pick.
Thanks, Justin.
All right, here we go. Number 5, Gerald Olin from 1408. A really, really, really small Samuel L. Jackson performance, but really good. I thought he set the tone for the movie very, very well. And just like the first couple moments, he has sort of explaining his reluctance to let John Cusack go up to the notorious room, but he just really sets the stage so well. And well after he's gone, he still leaves that kind of good presence in there when by the time he comes back in a rather creepy scene. My number 4.
That's a great movie, by the way.
It is. It is a really underappreciated 2000s movie, I think.
It really is. You've seen that, right?
I have seen it, but it's kind of funny. You guys are some of the few I've met that actually said they liked it.
Oh,
really?
I've seen it multiple times. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that were very underwhelmed by it, but I did find that movie a little funny at points. Like some of the stuff, maybe it's John Cusack, I don't know, but sometimes I thought that it was supposed to be tense, but...
I thought it was a good performance from him.
Yeah, I didn't have issues with it.
I mean, no, I think it's a decent movie, but I don't know.
Sam Jackson gives a good performance, though.
I was a little mad that he wasn't in the movie as much as it was advertised.
I know.
But that's another trailer talk conversation, so we'll just go off. Continue, Justin.
Number 4, much like Dan, is Frozone, The Incredibles. I thought he did an excellent job not only being a great side character, but also being basically this sort of meta commentary on the superhero genre as a whole. The whole scene where he's with Mr. Incredible in the car talking about how this villain just keeps on monologuing instead of trying to take him down is so painfully true. I quoted that for years after that came out. And much like you, I really hope he gets more to do in Incredibles 2.
Didn't you want to see more of him in The Incredibles?
Absolutely. When they brought him back for the third act, I was like, yes!
Yeah, I agree.
I'm pretty sure he'll find a way to make himself a bigger part.
I'm sure.
Being such a big, comic book fan that he is.
That is true.
Number 3 is one that I'm not sure either of you have seen, but I think is a really seldom discussed performance from Samuel L. Jackson, and that is Charles Moritz from The Red Violin.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
Good performance.
Good performance.
Wanted him to be in it more, once again.
The main reason I wanted to put it on this list is we always think of Samuel L. Jackson as this in-your-face, very powerful, and this, he takes it to a different angle, and it's kind of hard to appreciate his performance the first time around watching Red Violin, but when you look at it upon reflection, you look upon it in multiple viewings, you really get to see how his character sets the mood and sets the overall and really hits the overall message of the movie home. And it kind of lingers with you after the movie resolves. It's not a really big part, much like Joe mentioned. I think he only shows up for like a little bit in the first act, and then has a big portion in the end, because the story is really told in segments.
He sets the stage. He's kind of like what'd you call it?
We're working back to him.
Yeah. Please, I'm Samuel L. Jackson. Please tell me the story of the Red Violin, and then we go through the stories.
Yeah, which, I mean, he really does a really good job, and I think I wish people would mention the Red Violin more.
I'm unfamiliar with this movie completely. I'm glad you mentioned it.
It's a very interesting movie. I liked it. I think it's definitely understated, but I think I can understand why it gets missed sometimes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like...
it's not the first one that comes to mind when you think Sam Jackson.
No, it's not the general accessible fare for him, but it was a pretty good performance, definitely.
And number 2, much like you, Joe, is Elijah Price, Unbreakable. I can't say too much about this one because obviously we're going to be talking about it later on the show, but a really, I would argue, quite possibly his most complicated character he has ever played. I think his character comes off as a little bit goofy at times, sort of to be expected, but yeah. I think he does a good job with it, and I really think he's not really done a performance like it since.
All right, Joe. I don't think we even need to hear your number 1. It's RoboCop, 2014. With the vocal exercises in the beginning.
All right.
Oh, God.
You really want me to get me started on that again?
No,
with the line and then
sorry about that. That was annoying.
No, I'm telling you, since we're on it,
tell me.
I did like that, but I liked him, but the fact that was how they started that movie should have let you know somebody was trying to make somebody angry, and one of them was me.
It's about the only good part of that movie.
It was entertainingly bad.
All right.
Anyway. Well, no. Actually, I thought you were gonna actually guess it. It's Julius Winfield from Pulp Fiction. Most quotable. He owns that movie. Makes John Travolta look great. Really, he just steals every scene that he's in. I'm not going to say it's necessarily like a breakthrough, but I think it kind of set the standard for what people expect. It's his typical kind of role, but it's really the best we ever see him executed. It's hilarious, it's powerful, it's intricate. He does have some amazing lines, great delivery. When you think Tarantino, he's probably one of the first people that come to your mind. Mm-hmm. What else is there to say? It's amazing.
That's right. And that's why he's also my number 1.
Yeah,
I think everyone probably saw that coming. It's not only Sam Jackson's best role, but it's one of the best characters Tarantino has ever written. Mm-hmm. It's so quotable, like you said, Joe. He performs it with such intensity, but with a sense of humor. And, Pulp Fiction is, I would say, probably the first, really, quote-unquote, artsy movie I had ever seen. We talk a lot on the show about how I'm not quite so much with that kind of stuff, and this isn't obviously as artsy as some of the ones we've talked about this year on the show, like Under the Skin or Enemy.
It's pretty unconventional, though.
But it's the first movie, and I remember this so vividly. I came out of the theater, and I turned to my friend, and I said, "What the hell did we just watch?" And I didn't dislike it. I just was very confused, and it had to sit with me for a week, and then... Same friend, I saw him in school, and I said, you know what? That movie, Pulp Fiction, was actually pretty awesome. And we talked about it then constantly from then on. It's such a great movie, and what a performance to really break on the scene. He had a minor role in Jurassic Park, huge hit, obviously. People saw him in that. But this was his breakout performance, clearly. And for me, still his best.
Yeah.
Justin?
Carly Haley, A Time to Kill.
Ooh.
An absolutely fantastic performance from Samuel L. Jackson in the very extent of the word. Jules Winfield was a great performance as well. I thought this was just... It really, really completely shattered my perspective of how much range and depth Samuel L. Jackson has as an actor. And the interplay with Matthew McConaughey, particularly with the big monologue at the end, which I consider quite possibly one of the best movie monologues ever written. It's truly powerful stuff.
Probably, in all honesty, it's probably my favorite courtroom drama in retrospect. And Samuel L. Jackson does give a great performance there. I can definitely see it. It's one I'm pretty sure if you saw it, I'm sure somebody else would have got knocked off that list.
Now that I like McConaughey. again.
Definitely.
But I gotta warn you, this is early McConaughey. It's like
Yeah, but it's not romantic comedy.
like there's
McConaughey.
there's this period between.
Because I like Dazed and Confused.
Like it's here. This is how it goes. All right. With McConaughey, it starts with Dazed and Confused.
Mm-hmm.
It's good up to Contact, and then between Contact and say
and Lincoln Lawyer.
Lincoln Lawyer.
Yeah.
There's about a 14, like what? There's
like a 14, 15 year gap.
There's a decade or
Where you
so
don't need
gap.
to see anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Contact was good, and then after that, it's like plummeted forever.
All right, well, we'll hear more about Unbreakable and Elijah Price coming up later on in the show. But right now, we're going to start our triple feature with Prometheus, and that is our new classic for the week, and Justin's going to have that.
After Elizabeth Shaw, played by Noomi Rapace, and her boyfriend discover a star map in Scotland that could point to the originators of humanity, Peter Wayland, played by Guy Pearce, funds a 4-year expedition to the moon that maps are pointing to, aided by Wayland's android David to monitor the expedition. Though as the team reaches their destination, they slowly discover that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and soon it becomes a battle to save Earth from a vicious attacker. With director Ridley Scott at his best, he's using stories to tackle big ideas. In Blade Runner, that involved humanity. In Alien, one could argue vulnerability. And in Prometheus, the sort of but not really sidequel to the Alien franchise, he's taking on faith. Though in contrast to so many movies that have explored this concept, Prometheus explores both sides rather well, while still providing compelling and suspenseful storytelling. Granted, screenwriter Damon Lindelof's, as per usual Lost fashion, poses more questions than answers, but it's ultimately those questions that reside with the viewers after the film is over and welcome the thought of multiple viewings. This is complemented by a cast of interesting characters, such as the contrast between Rapace and Fassbender, as two characters essentially searching for the same thing, yet dealing with the results very differently. Although the side characters aren't really given much to do, and in some cases, as Joe's mentioned many a time to me, do rather foolish things given their stature, these contrasting perspectives lend itself to wanting to go beyond what has been placed on screen. Prometheus is a brave new direction in expanding the alien mythology that has near unlimited potential, and I give it an A-.
All right, Joe?
Prometheus is a film that I admit I truly do like. I'm a big fan of the Alien franchise, and I feel there are many possibilities for where the story can go. The film has been hated by some fans of the franchise and loved by others. I will say that in terms of visuals and soundtrack, this film captures the same spirit of the original. I also do feel that it deals with some very big ideas, as Justin pointed out, that mainstream science fiction really hasn't tackled in some time. So it kind of brings sci-fi as a whole back to its roots, which I really do approve of, along with some really great performances, especially from Michael Fassbender. It also captures the horror of the original film, and that's a huge plus. It still doesn't excuse some hiccups in the writing, though, as we're getting to, mostly just characters making decisions that contradict their mission and their status and supposed expertise. Some of the actions they take go against logic and kind of turns them into dumb slasher movie victims, just to rack up a body count. I'm not saying all the characters are like that, but there are some pretty big dumb moments that sadly I can't overlook. But still, despite that, it posed many interesting questions, and it made me really look forward to a sequel, and I also give it an A-.
Very nice. Well, as I mentioned earlier in my review for Edge of Tomorrow, every summer, one of the trickiest blockbuster categories to pull off is the sci-fi action film. 2 years ago, it was Prometheus, which hits the exact right balance of great story, good sci-fi, and compelling characters. As you both mentioned, it is definitely a bit confusing, leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and some of the characters make some questionable decisions. But visually, it is absolutely stunning, and Joe also hit on the soundtrack, which really helps the whole mood of the film. And performances from Theron, Fassbender, and Pacific Rim's own Idris Elba really shine through.
We're canceling the apocalypse.
Prometheus also gets an A- from me. Oh. Well, Pacific Rim is last summer they tried to make that the big sci-fi action, and it was just like, no. And then World War Z, successful movie.
Didn't really know what it wanted to be.
A bit of an underwhelming film. Elysium probably would have been the one last year that hit.
Elysium I thought was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same vein.
We all kind of like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're all sort of on the same page here with Prometheus.
Triple A-.
Triple A-. I will say, one of the things that bothers me a little bit, and maybe this is about Ridley Scott's films just in general, is that the the Blu-ray package for this movie had a big, like, sticker on it touting how questions will be answered, you know, when you watch the bonus features and all this. And that really, like, is infuriating.
Well, how do you
if you know questions are unanswered, put them in your movie.
I wouldn't blame him. I would blame Fox Marketing for that.
Well, that is true. But that's one reason why a lot of people were mad.
Right.
Because they're like, ooh, we're going to find out where the aliens came from.
Right.
Kind of, sort of. Not really. Ooh.
Well, Justin, you say don't blame him, but we had the same issue with The Counselor. There were all of these things that made no sense. Obviously, this is a much better film than The Counselor, but it's sort of, you know, Ridley Scott's go-to is
kind of makes
sort
you
of
a big plot,
Yeah.
big ideas, make you think like it's gonna really be something that's gonna like have this really like profound moment, and
it just leaves you confused.
it's similar problem, obviously a lot worse than The Counselor, but I do
Right.
see what you're saying. It is kind of like trying to handle these ideas that maybe aren't quite as interwoven as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Then again, I think that the Alien franchise is more his baby than a novel adaptation.
Of course.
You know.
They make a couple allusions here and there in the movie to some things that end up happening in Alien, such as how some of the eggs work.
Well, there are some things I could see why it would infuriate some fans. Like, it does almost seem like the script is kind of pandering. Like, for instance, I believe even he stated this is not a prequel, but it is kind of a prequel. So it's like, it's almost like you're trying to satisfy people and get people's butts in seats by saying this is directly connected to the Alien franchise when it only sort of is. And then they have literally some scenes which you think, okay, ooh, they're actually going to the spot where they went in the first movie. This is how this happened. But wait, that's not. It's just an exact same coincidence. I mean, like, that seems a little convenient. But, you know, so like I said, I can understand some people's issues with this one. I mean, I really like it, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I can too. I mean, I have friends in both camps of it, and I can see both sides of it.
It's like, it annoys me too, but I still think the film, I kind of almost feel like if it was its own thing, that would make it stronger. But it's like it almost relies a little too much on the Alien franchise.
Sitting on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Something like that, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred if it was a standalone film as well.
I mean, I like the fact it's connected, but already that creates some problems. Like, for instance, I don't know how you guys felt about it. You know, the whole mystery, it's kind of one of the aspects of the movie is that of the Alien franchise, sometimes the mystery of, like, how we don't know much about the xenomorphs kind of is one of the things that makes them so frightening. If we learn more about them, it makes them less frightening. And for instance, the space jockeys, I just saw like a big giant elephant guy. Like, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really cool creature.
Right.
Oh, it's just a big, albino guy that's the creator of humanity. That's a little disappointing. You know what I mean? It's cooler when you don't know sometimes. Yeah. Let the imagination go. So
I can agree with that.
Whenever, like, it's like when they try to go and make a prequel to something else, like, would example, say, the Star Wars movies. When they try to explain something, if they say, this is exactly how it is, instead of keeping some of the mystery, some people are going to take issue with it.
Right.
It's always a risk when you do something related to another franchise.
I can definitely see everybody's issues with the movie. I think all of us can. But for us, it was enjoyable.
You know what?
I mean, visually, it's just outstanding. Did you guys see it in 3D in the theaters?
I don't think so.
Because I did, and it was...
Was it good in 3D?
The 3D was really good in it, yeah. If
it wasn't for that one scene, in the cave with the expert, freaking biologist.
That was mind-numbingly stupid.
I'm like,
of him.
Why?
He wanted a hug, Joe.
No.
Yeah, that wasn't working for me either. All right, well, our old classic for the week, as we've discussed, is Unbreakable. That was Joe's pick. So let's hear about that, Joe.
All right, I'll tell you about it. Unbreakable is a 2000 superhero drama directed by M. Night Shyamalan and starring Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. The film follows David Dunn, played by Willis, a security guard whose marriage is extremely strained, who survives a train crash, being the only survivor, and even more surprisingly, being completely unharmed. He is soon approached by Elijah Price, played by Samuel L. Jackson, a major comic book collector and enthusiast with a rare disorder which makes his bones extremely brittle. Inspired by the idea of comics as a secret truth about humanity, Elijah believes David may in fact be a real-life superpowered being and encourages him to take on the responsibility of a hero. David at first doesn't believe this, but soon the evidence becomes clear that he may have to take on a new role and fill the void that has been haunting him his whole life. Unbreakable is probably my favorite Shyamalan movie. I think the story here is extremely unique, and the comic books, being a serious subject, speaks to how important they are to me. I feel I can really relate very well to both these characters, and I love the dynamic between them. This movie has some very powerful dialogue and a killer soundtrack that keep you sucked into the haunting atmosphere. It also has one of Jackson's best performances, and proves that he can do more than just scream and curse. It might not be quite on par with The Sixth Sense for some, but I still feel this one is way too overshadowed by the other. Still, it does have some flaws, like some pacing issues towards the beginning, as well as some characters whose actions either make them very unlikable or just kind of inhuman. Primarily Bruce Willis's wife, who you can completely understand why their marriage is strained, because she's pretty much useless.
The worst.
She was easily a very distracting, annoying part you could have really written her out. Still, I feel that this movie speaks to the very serious comic book fans, and is a very good movie for everyone, despite its simplicity, and I give it an A-.
Well, everybody generally agrees, I think, and not just in this room, that Shyamalan fizzled out after his initial few movies, and for me, it was an all-downhill progression, peaking with his debut, The Sixth Sense. But Unbreakable is also a very well-told story, with top-notch acting from the two leads, and we discussed in the top 5, the chemistry also between the two is just outstanding. The unfortunate part of Unbreakable is actually in Shyamalan's directing. I found it erratic and unfocused for this one. I'm not sure if it was a case of too many good ideas and not being able to decide, but other than that, it's a very solid follow-up to Sixth, and I give it a B+. Justin?
On the show, I've mentioned that I believe that every great protagonist needs an equally strong, if not even better, villain. While the concept occasionally becomes a bit absurd, Unbreakable fits the bill and so much more in exploring how a superhero would fit into the real world. In contrast to his usual tough guy roles, Willis does a great job playing his quote-unquote hero as more or less of an everyman, struggling with the sheer idea that he may be anything more than that. This adds for great interplay between Jackson playing a man who truly cannot live without the hope of something better. Since this treats the superhero concept as an origin story, there's far more drama than initial action, but the time passes quickly and the writing for the most part is spot on. Unfortunately, unlike Shyamalan's prior film The Sixth Sense, his signature twist habit, this time around, is slightly more predictable due to a rather smug on Shyamalan's part prior scene. But despite that, still feels complete, largely thanks to Jackson's final few lines in the film. Unbreakable is definitely not going to be for everyone, but it does continue to serve as a reminder that Shyamalan did in fact once make good movies, and I give it a B+.
It's an entirely worthy follow-up to The Sixth Sense, and it's, you know, like I said, this downhill progression. I mean, I thought Signs was probably like a B-ish, and then it just sort of really goes down from there.
Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the consensus. It's kind of funny with him. You know, most people don't start that strongly. You know, he starts with a movie that's pretty much universally loved.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's like Unbreakable was almost as good. Then Signs is like, you know, it's decent, kind of silly, and then it's like after that it just gets worse and worse, and eventually it just starts being complete.
Starts ticking down exponentially.
The Village was, I mean, I feel
I didn't care for The Village.
Village, I liked, you know, some
was okay.
some stylistic elements, but once again, ripping off something.
Well, yeah.
I mean, Lady in the Water, liked some ideas.
Never saw it. So
Yeah, that one I didn't see.
I mean, I like Paul Giamatti, obviously, and
Sure.
the girl, who is she?
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yeah, Bryce Dallas Howard.
You know, she was
from
cool.
The Village.
Cool, yeah. I mean, no, I mean, a cool concept. It's like he likes to pick these really unique stories, and he likes to run with them, but I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
Well, sometimes he doesn't know what to do with them. Like After Earth, the story on the surface isn't really that terrible.
But it's also not that original.
I'm not saying it's original. You're right, but it just wasn't executed well at all. And here in Unbreakable, I think the script is probably the best
strongest
part.
thing. Yeah,
the lines and just
the story,
the characterization between the two, and the story
and the characters. Like the bulk of the script is very good, but you're right. Some of the execution's a bit off. Like you can still see that he's kind of experimenting there. Like he's doing a lot of his like pull-outs and pull-ins, and you're like, okay, you did this a little bit in The Sixth Sense, and it was a little erratic.
His directing seemed more focused in The Sixth Sense, though, than it does here. And I don't know if that's...
A lot of people... Well, I'll say two things. One thing is that this movie actually follows a lot of parallels with The Sixth Sense in terms of its story. So he might have been trying to just mix it up a little bit.
That's true.
Because if he had actually done it in a more concentrated way, I think it would have seemed exactly like The Sixth Sense in a lot of ways. Think of Bruce Willis, Kid, Twist, similar ideas. Like, really, a lot of people have compared it to The Sixth Sense because it follows a lot of the same structure. So maybe that was him trying to mix it up a little.
Could be.
Also, in terms of what to do with it, he originally wanted it to be a 3-part story. He wanted to be the origin, the rise, and the fall of the hero. So instead of getting that awesome idea...
Like 3 separate movies?
Yep.
Oh.
Unbreakable, what was it? Unbreakable, Breakable, Broken, or something like that.
Interesting.
I'm glad you did mention that, Joe, because, I mean, he had an interview a little while ago, and he basically said it could still happen.
I mean, I've always wanted it because Unbreakable has obviously always been my favorite movie of his, and I thought there was a lot of potential there to really explore that idea, because apparently he's a big comic book guy, because this was sort of his dream. He wanted to make this a trilogy.
It's his love letter to the industry.
Yeah, and obviously you can tell in the movie, it's comics, but it's serious, and so instead of getting 2 more great Unbreakable related movies, we got Signs and The Village.
Lady in the
Water. And The Happening.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe you should have just finished that first and then went to other things, because, you know what I mean? I don't know.
I still think you should go back to it. I mean...
You gotta remember, it's like over a decade later, do people don't talk about it. It's got a cult following. It did well, but people don't really talk about it that much.
And what studio is going to back it? I mean, even in the After Earth trailers, they buried his name. They didn't say anything about M. Night Shyamalan because they know his name is box office poison.
He's got to show he can do something good before he can tackle that big a project again.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate because I agree it would be really interesting to revisit this world. All right, our final film for the show is the Oscar nominee A to Z, and we are up to Amadeus. This one was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, and it won 8 of them, including a trophy for Best Actor for F. Murray Abraham, Adapted Screenplay, Director Milos Forman, Best Picture, and 4 of the technical awards. And it was also nominated for Best Actor. Last time that a movie has been nominated for 2 Best Actors. And that was Tom Hulce, who plays Mozart himself, and cinematography and film editing. Set in Vienna, Amadeus sees Antonio Salieri, played by Abraham, confessing to a priest his murder of Amadeus Mozart, and all the events leading up to it. As such, the film is told in flashback and frequently returns to the elderly Salieri and priest, much like recent F. Murray Abraham performance The Grand Budapest Hotel, in which he's the storyteller, and the film is told largely in his perspective. The film takes us through Mozart's rise to success and Salieri's envy that Mozart is so young, unrefined, yet possesses such a massive talent. This is an absolutely epic film in most senses of the word. Clocking in at 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that's just the theatrical cut, Forman's Amadeus does run a little bit long, but that's basically one of its only downfalls. The award-winning costumes and art direction are astounding, and the performances are great from the 2 leads, not to mention Principal Rooney himself, Jeffrey Jones, as Roman Emperor Joseph II, who hires Salieri as the official court composer. In fact, I actually prefer Hulce's wacky, fantastic Mozart performance to Abraham's. Both good. I think I actually would have given the trophy to Hulce. Sometimes the musical scenes go on too long, and as beautiful as Mozart's music is, you want to get back to the main story. Plus, a few of the performers are truly horrible lip syncers, and it kept taking me a little bit out of the movie. But these are nitpicks for a truly great film, and I give Amadeus an A. Joe?
First of all, where's the Beethoven movie?
That is true.
I mean, he really deserves it. I like Mozart, but I've always been more a fan of Beethoven. As I was viewing this film with my colleagues, I recounted the fact that F. Murray Abraham is the villain, and it seems like he really overshadows the main character. I think that it was an interesting narrative choice, but I feel this does take away from the main character himself, so that did bug me a little bit. Still, the story is very interesting, the music is integrated well for the most part, and the performances are top-notch. I also felt really impressed by the costumes and the set design. They were just outstanding. It is perhaps a bit overly long, as Dan mentioned, but it's still worth the watch, especially if you're interested in historical bios or just classical music history itself, and I would give it an A-.
Nice. It's definitely one of the most well-done music biopics I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
Justin?
Some of the best biopics to have been released choose to focus on the entire life of the main subject, such as in My Left Foot or Gandhi, whereas in current cinema, the emphasis is placed on pivotal moments in the subject's life, such as the King's Speech and Lincoln. Amadeus does the latter, but does so not from the perspective of Amadeus, as we've mentioned, but rather from his rival Antonio Salieri, played wonderfully by Abraham, and his opening quote-unquote confession of killing the titular character always leaves a haunting impression. However, the film does not demonize or glorify either character, but rather displays the envy of having an incredible talent and going unnoticed in contrast to another celebrity. As a result, Salieri becomes so much more than a formidable adversary. He becomes an empathetic villain. Alongside this, the look and feel of the film introduces drama without ever becoming melodramatic, something I wish more movies would take note of when tackling period pieces, which keeps the film's epic running time running smoothly without feeling too much of the length. Amadeus is a brilliant and well-told perspective of a character suffering from the cruel fate of living in the shadows of a legend, and I give it an A+.
Wow. A+ from Justin. Justin, you did mention, though, the demonizing, or the non-demonizing, I should say, of the two characters. That was a very good point.
That is good.
The characterization of these two is really well done. I mean, who knows if this is how it really went, but you have to imagine Mozart's life has been studied, for centuries now. So
it's probably exaggerated.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's probably a bit exaggerated, but for the film it works well.
Mm.
And you can sort of see, both of their perspectives on it.
Yeah.
Even though it's told in Salieri's perspective, you can certainly see how Mozart, feels about the other and his fame and etc. So, I don't know. I thought Tom Hulce did a great job as Mozart.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's so, wacky and weird, but it never feels like it's too over the top.
No. He's, prissy.
Yeah. Which I think it would have been easy to do.
Well, from what
as a caricature, and I don't think he makes it one.
From what I understand about Mozart, he was kind of a spoiled brat, basically. So I can understand that. I think it was a fitting performance.
Yeah. All right. Well, ending on a high note.
Well, that A being a note,
that is true.
It could work.
That is true. A sharp. That will do it for the show this week. Joe, what's new on your channel on YouTube, The Merlin Boss?
I did another anime video, this time relating to the villains of my favorite shows ever, Fullmetal Alchemist. And I also, before I came here, did a live stream hanging out and talking about X-Men.
Oh, nice. Just the new film or just X-Men in general?
Told Justin about this. It was basically you could come up with your own personal team of X-Men. You pick 7. They can't be villains. And they have to be someone established as people you would think would work well together in combat as well as character-wise.
Cool.
So, yeah.
That'll definitely be interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. Well, you can join up on the Facebook group if you haven't thus far. We do our 5-word reviews there weekly, preceding that week's episode. And that is at Film Fanatics with an exclamation point on Facebook. And we've also got the Twitter, where we'll give the link to the latest episode that's up, and that is at Film Fanatics Pod. And want to welcome our new Twitter followers, the band Real Big Fish. Love those guys. So thanks for stumbling upon us. And, of course, we also have the YouTube page you can subscribe to. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for listening. Bye!
Hail Hydra.